This episode is sponsored by Soul Viagra. The weight of the universe getting you down, feeling like a helpless speck in the face of an unforgiving maelstrom? Soul Viagra will provide you with that extra oomph to keep getting up in the morning. In addition, this episode is sponsored by Personal Reasons. What is that, you ask? None of your business. And lastly, this episode is sponsored by Syzygy. Syza what? Conjunctio. Gesundheit. Don't know what those words mean? Google Abraxas and grow the fuck up. Clears throat. Welcome to the Pinkhurst Podcast. Our guest today is Mary Antonia Wood, the chair of the MA in Depth Psychology and Creativity with emphasis in the Arts and Humanities program of the Pacifica Graduate Institute, and the owner of Talesman Creative Mentoring, a practice that supports artists and creators of all types. Wood has been a visual artist for over 30 years, working in a variety of media. Welcome to the hearse.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Zach. And thanks to your incredible sponsors. I'm going to have to look into some of those products right away.
I know. We all need some Soul Viagra right
Absolutely.
now. Even women, men, women alike. How are you today? Where are you? What are you feeling? What's the word?
I am good. I am on the central coast of California, where almost like clockwork in the summer, we have a cool and moody morning that yields to a glorious sunny afternoon. So that transition has just taken place.
Beautiful. And I too am in the region, so experiencing that, and it's a nice metaphor of something, that transition from the moody gloom to the sun peeking out. After reading your book, The Archetypal Artist, Reimagining Creativity and the Call to Create, I found myself inspired, humbled, and seen. As I sat down to prepare this episode, I began to feel overwhelmed due to the incredible amount of revelations and ideas in your book. Panic set in, and I felt lost in a sea of eurekas without the tools to properly organize, synthesize, and pay homage to them all. I transferred the underlined passages to notes, panicked again, went from computer to phone, panicked, considered using AI, had an existential crisis, and then decided to just keep chipping away by hand. Long story short, this episode preparation has been the most challenging to date, which perhaps implies there is a philosopher's boon hidden underneath. And in the spirit of all that, I felt it appropriate to open with a quote from the introduction of your book. Approach creativity as one might approach a wild animal in the forest, with a sense of reverent awe combined with a dose of humility. So I want to set that intention for myself approaching this episode.
Yes.
So this morning, I spoke to one of my collaborators and dear friends, both of us fathers, both of us prolific and ambitious since young teenagers in the creative fields, and both of us feeling a lot of weight recently in just the day-to-day of raising a family, which obviously is a blessing in many ways, but also incredibly intense.
Mm-hmm.
And something about kind of the gas leaking out of the balloon of our chipperness, which I'm actually surprised I kept mine going for a lot longer than some of my peers growing up. I'm 38 now. But it was interesting to talk to him and check in after a while, almost both of us having this similar. He described his as a numbness, but it's almost for me like a gun shy, a bit confused as to where to put energy, a little bit. I don't know how much of it's the macro collective we're going through. I don't know how much of it is, right on time with our age. But I figured I'd preface and begin this episode exploring creativity, exploring your incredible book, which examines obviously the roots of creativity, connecting to shamanism and in your own experience from what I understand. And I know you don't have an I in your book, so I know that just from some brief interaction we've had, but that you have navigated paths of dissatisfaction in earlier career, I believe, and then being brave and finding a way in the middle of your journey to pivot, I'm sure die, reconnect, and now coming here where not only are you having a rich, fulfilled, inspired life, but helping others do that. So I just wanted to put that out, feeling that personally in my field and some of my close friends, and hopefully, as your book did for me, this episode can shed some light on navigating that tough time.
Yeah, thank you. Zach, as you're reflecting on where you are in your own life and your contemporary, your friend, both of you fathers, I have also been reflecting on where I am in my life. I just turned 66 10 days ago or so.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Exactly 10 days ago. So, yeah, I'm in a different place, but remembering where I was at your place as well. I think these stages of our lives all come with their own initiations. Most people will ignore those. I know that you have paid close attention to all that I gathered in this book. And one of the main themes that struck me at a time, the classic Dark Night of the Soul, which probably my worst one, not my only one, but the hardest one, the most long-lived, was when I was about 50. The classic time, midlife.
Which I have something to look forward to.
Oh, yes. Get ready. But you don't have to deal with menopause, so that you can put aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was dealing with like a triple whammy of felt like I'd lost my way as an artist and creator. I'd actually physically lost my space, my place, my community of creators. This was a cross-country move that my husband and I made, thinking it was the right thing to do. And in hindsight, it was the thing to do. It was part of our fate. But there was a severing of a lot of who I thought I was, what I thought I had accomplished, and picking up those pieces and trying to make a new life someplace didn't work out the way that I had thought it might. I did not find the fellow artists, the community, the culture that I was looking for. It was quite a different spot geographically as well. I'm a sunshine person, having grown up in the Southwest. There's a certain latitude that I must not go beyond north, and that's where we were. So that was also a very real, physiological pressure. Once I came across, and it took a while, this idea of creative illness.
Yeah, I got that.
That was part of the impetus for this book, is to bring together some ancient, some new, some depth psychological ideas around what it means to go through these periods of fallowness, of loss, of disorientation, and those creative illnesses, the term coined by Henri Ellenberger, who wrote a big, hefty volume on the origins of depth psychology, how it is connected to ancient healing practices.
Ellenberger defined creative illness as a prolonged period of suffering prior to a creative breakthrough. The breakthrough may yield revelations with the power to transform and redirect the course of one's life. Enduring a creative illness is a form of personal soul work and is akin to the self-sacrifice and oftentimes risky initiatory experiences of the shaman. The benefits derived from these types of ordeals are not only received by the sufferer, but also are subsequently offered as gifts to the community. That's from your book.
Yes. And I could read that and understand it intellectually about others, particularly Jung, Freud, those early depth psychological icons. Their personal creative illnesses are well documented, and as are the this arc of the shaman's path. But then when you have your own, it's very helpful to have perspectives that are ancient, that people have found strength, direction, comfort. Saying all that, I want to go back to your opening about the macrocosm. One of the things that has impressed me about Jung's thought is that C.G. Jung is that he insisted that we can't separate an individual's life from the life of the collective. The individual soul suffering is entangled in the suffering of the world. And James Hillman, who built upon Jung's work, Hillman's closer to our time. He just passed in 2011. He insisted that any kind of therapy, any kind of soul work had to be also a therapy of ideas, of culture, of places, of politics, of relationships, of everything. That an individual person's sufferings, their individual life path is bound with that of the collective and that of an ensouled world.
And now is a tricky time, to say the least, with some of the, rapid evolutions or de-evolutions of technology and political something's always happening at all times, but it does feel like we're at the crossroads of a unique moment in time that's quite overwhelming and brings everything up into question and is perhaps apocalyptic in the etymological sense of the unveiling and the renewal and also the pulling down. So I agree in my time. It's funny. I feel like I've been in a perpetual dark night of the soul since 13, and now being sober officially, on and off I was, but officially for the first time over a year now, since 14, and all the ways I coped, etc. It's really brought up a lot around identity, death. And so I chose and am choosing to name this episode Her Intense Daydream of Me. That's inspired by a quote, which I will get to from your book, but the idea of the soul, that we are vessels for the soul, really was one of the themes that helped me in my just kind of grokking / things clicking that I've always sensed. And also, the idea of, I remember a great story my dad told me about a master and the student says he's ready for the final secret of it all after years of training, and the master says you're not, but he stubbornly insists he is, and the master says the truth at the center of it all is you don't exist. And then goes on, the master's son dies, he's sobbing. The student says, wait a minute, I thought we don't exist. Why are you crying? I thought it's all an illusion. The master growls through his tears, it is all an illusion, but I happen to be particularly fond of that fucking illusion. But it's easy to just say, you don't exist, I am not I. Your book, for the first time, went deep into the specifics of what may be happening and feels true to me of what the soul is actually trying to do. To begin, I thought it fitting to start with the question, what is an artist? Like, what is an artist? Your book opens with a bit of an exploration of that. One of the inquiries that you explored. So we all have the creative instinct, it seems, like kind of summarizing a lot of the theories of whether it's Jung or great minds, and are constantly creating, whether consciously or not, that it's an instinct along with the other instincts we have. Perhaps the artist is someone who actively engages this instinct and takes it to another level, one who feels a need to make beyond necessity, to recombine what is given into new forms, and to create something extraordinary out of the ordinary. What are your thoughts on all of this, how would you define an artist, and how does the defining and the work you did with that book and the understanding better help you and us to understand our roles and gifts?
That's one of the key questions that I circled around in that book. And I think that you probably picked up that it was this sort of circumambulation around that, around it again and again. And I continue to do that in my own life, approaching my own work, thinking about artists that I know, artists that are known and unknown. Where I seem to settle is on an idea of devotion. If we start with Jung's notion that Hillman carried further, that there is such a thing as a creative instinct that's part of every human life. It manifests itself differently in each person's life. The opus of one's life is our greatest creative work. No matter if we call ourselves creative, if we use the artist label for ourselves, and possibly, well, I know there are people who are too humble, people who would not use the term artist for themselves, yet they maintain a sense of devotion to a calling that comes with much confusion at times, comes with responsibilities. It comes with a feeling of having to sacrifice. So an artist to me is one who is willing to enter into a relationship with a calling that they feel, to nurture it, develop it, show up for it, sacrifice to it, to give their all as much as they can while still living a human life. You know, we are all human, and having a multidimensional human life should not prevent us from a devotion to a calling. But there is something akin to the kind of vows that people take when they enter religious service that I see paralleling an artist who can maintain that devotion, that attention to an initial calling for long periods of time. That doesn't mean that we don't sometimes turn our backs or we don't just get exhausted or drift away, but it's the coming back to it and offering it time, attention, power. As I'm saying those words, one of the opening statements by a creator that I use in this book is by Mary Oliver, one that will feel just like a gut punch to a lot of creators because it's so true in that, and I'll paraphrase her if I can't think of the exact words, that the most regretful people on earth are those who have felt a creative calling, like restive, urging them, but they gave it neither time nor power. So, turning to a poet, which I do often, various poets in this book, they can say something that the rest of us, circle around for hours. They can distill it down into something as simple as an artist gives time and power to that spark, to that seed, to that voice that says you are chosen for this. This is part of, or maybe the main part of your soul's yearning, your life purpose during this lifetime.
And I like the idea that you seem to almost hint around here. Molly has talked to me about it. Jung obviously has spoken about it, that if you're not careful of maybe separating yourself, maybe the body, the smaller vessel self, from the creativity that comes through, it can get conflated in a dangerous way, and you may even feel bitter as if you've been robbed because all of this time, energy, sacrifice, what? And a lot of us, at least for me, some of my talents growing up aligned in the only way I would make it is if I was a successful, famous being, and I got close to that, etc. But so yeah, I guess it's back to the beginning, what I said with Michael, when the weight of life, we're not kids anymore, and I prolonged that as long as I could, and a little marijuana, a little alcohol, little things like that kept me going, or numb to some of the whispers of reality's gravity. And then the carrots we dangle, maybe this time we'll make it. Yeah. And then it's part of my initiation, I think, just being born where I am. And also great quotes like those who the gods wish to punish, they first make famous, or they grant their wishes, or yada, yada. My whole mantra these days is real men surrender, real men fail. Failure is kind of the success in an upside down way. But yeah, just wanting to coax that out a bit here in the beginning with Michael and I feeling jaded or bamboozled, but I'm also trying to realign in a healthy manner now. And I'm grateful for the existential pressure I feel as I try to fall asleep, and the squirming in such a pure way that I haven't felt in so long, and was probably underneath a lot of my work. And the heroicism, the martyrness, the Icarusness that perhaps was driving. Yes. And now I'm like, man, I don't know what I am. I know I like watching the NBA and the British baking show, and I appreciate, anyway, just feeling kind of tongue-tied and a little bit disoriented and awkward and clumsy. But to move on, enough about me. What do you think about me? You know that joke? What does a narcissist say? Enough about me. What do you think about me? Anyway, right. So we've kind of teased out what is an artist. Also, long story short, please go read this book. Like, I can't, in my preparation, as I mentioned, I was imagining Michael Meade defining an elder to me one time about someone who stands in the flood of information, or the light of information pouring into the world, and is able in their elderliness to process it, where for others it could become madness or just this flood, and to distill it in a way. And you do that in your book. So go read this book. That's really, and I'm kind of like, I could just quote you the whole time, but I want to speak to you as well. So I'm trying to find that dance. The prehistoric shaman remains the archetype of all artists. Image maker, dancer, drummer, actor, singer, healer, holy one. The shaman epitomizes the human need to bridge worlds, to fly beyond the everyday realm of the visual in order to conjure worlds of visionary presence and power. Shamanism came into being at a time when man could not help feeling inferior in relation to his environment. He began to carry on the struggle for existence by spiritual means, and came to attach special importance to the state of his soul as a condition of survival. So that's pretty much what I just explained I'm going through. I feel very inferior, confused by my environment. My materialistic ambitions proved faulty, or if they fell short. Luckily, I've read enough of cool stuff like your book to know that that's, in a weird way, a blessing. Can you speak to, is there anything in that realm you'd like to speak on?
I want to maybe go back just a bit to your last question, circling about this, around this confusion and the fact that the person that we know ourselves to be might be more of a vessel for the soul. One of the things that continues to fascinate me and torment me, and something that I want to include more of in a second edition to this book, an expanded edition that I'm just starting to work on, is the idea of what is a me? What is me? What is the I that we know ourselves to be? Is it synonymous with our soul, or are we more like a vehicle for the soul? This I ego self that is maybe the car, to use a metaphor, that thinks it wants to drive and does. It helps us navigate this world. but the real driver is the soul. And I do feel there's a separation. There's an I, me that partakes of this potentially eternal being, figure, essence, something that chose to live through me and with me. So I'm constantly looking at, noting how different cultures, different creators, different philosophers, psychologists have thought about this relationship of the I to the soul and to this ineffable thing that we can't really describe, from which the soul emerged.
Molly just finished reading Re-envisioning Psychology, and we're going to trade. I told her she should read your book, and I'm going to read Hillman's book, because that really was dynamite for her psyche, based off, all the work she's done, graduating from Pacifica. She has a thriving practice. She's deep in the flow, but she really was not intimidated, but just rattled and inspired by Hillman's ferocious blade of kind of cutting through certain presumptions or cliche, like oneness, for example. That's what I'm getting at. And it reminds me of what you're saying, that perhaps it's not just all oneness. Like, we come from oneness, we go back to oneness, but it's also individual and separateness and oneness simultaneously, perhaps. So that's something I've felt. Like, I do feel there is a me, like the little me, like Zach. Like, there's a Zach. And maybe there's a higher Zach. Anyway, I'm not trying to answer, but from my experience, because I have been pondering that there may be the soul Zach who has lived many lives, and now I'm like a little version of him, or an instrument, or, a spy.
His
gathering
vessel,
intel. I said in a song that's coming out soon something about that, like, I'm just a spy for the God. This is intel, written like a get well card for the infidels. That's kind of what my poetry is, a get well card for the infidels. No, but to be explored, and I like to leave that question hanging there. But continue in any way.
Yeah, well, let me link it then to your other question about the shamanic ancestry of the artist. I think probably the most common of all the denominators across artists and shamans, and I would sort of bracket out at this point that shamanism is still a living tradition. I'm not talking about it in the book or now as a direct one-to-one correlation. I want to absolutely respect the healing practices that many cultures use that come under this term shamanism or others. But there are many parallels to a type of individual who, through training, initiation, sacrifice, devotion, is able to penetrate various worlds. This is, the classic shamanic journey of moving through realms of reality, of being able to let go enough of the me, of the I, of this concrete world that we think is the only reality. And again, through various techniques, meditation, fasting, drumming, many, many paths, including plant medicines, including substances. Other than that, people have had these glimpses of other realities. And those that can maintain themselves moving back and forth, it's more than a glimpse for them. It's actually a type of communication. It is education. And along with that comes a sense of service, the classic bringing back of the boon from that experience, something that can, for the artist, this is where the artist is separate from the mystic, which is a point that Joseph Campbell's wife, Jean Erdman Campbell, shared with him.
Because the artist creates something and the mystic kind of pontificates or talks about it.
Something like that. Her idea was that the artist had a craft, but that the artist was very much like a mystic. So the seer, the prophet, the mystic, the shaman, this figure, again, through training, devotion, and self-sacrifice, is able to move between realms and bring something back. And that something might be a medicine. It could be a revelation. It could be new knowledge. It could be a way forward for themselves.
A symbol.
A symbol. It could be something for their immediate community, family, friends, or it could be something for the world at large. So that journeying in between is the most key correlation between a shamanic sensibility in an artist, maker, creator, and a literal shaman per se.
Hollow bone is what I think of. The goal of the shaman elder is to become a hollow bone, which is what you described, of removing as much of call it what you want, but I don't know if it's ego. It gets tricky when you start trying to define specifically, which you did a wonderful job kind of dancing around that and quoting Hillman and Young, how it's, whether it's artist or soul, both those words defy definition. So there's an ambiguity to it. But removing all of those things that you can kind of tell in a different category, it might come up for me as self-consciousness, or my art is becoming imbued with wondering what the audience might like. Suddenly it's not that pure just channeling of what's coming through, and the hollow bone being the goal.
Yes.
And to kind of invert what, I don't know if you said this exactly, but perhaps the purpose is actually not for anything here. It's for the other world. That's kind of like being a spy, getting intel. So you're like a spy on the ground. I always think of the Ocean's 11 scene, if you recall, where Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Matt Damon are at this bar meeting with their connection, and Brad Pitt and George Clooney are speaking in gibberish code. Like the green fish found a feather on the roof and it's going to be raining heavily on Tuesday. And then he responds, the butter is moldy in the fridge, whatever they say. And then they look at Matt Damon expecting him to respond. He says something, just freestyling gibberish, and they bring him out. They're like, man, you just disrespected his daughter. I always think of, I loved the part about the oracle who speaks nonsense in order to make sense. That really, I relate to that a lot. I loved the idea of the trickster. Let's see, a major relief for me was the trickster always being a paradox. Coyote is a wanderer, a glutton, a lecher, a thief, a cheat, an outlaw, spoiler, loser, clown, pragmatist, horny old man, survivor, and of special interest to artists. The creative psyche is the same bubbling cauldron that invites and ignites both artists and madmen. I'm obviously combining quotes there. A manifestation of primordial chaos. And then, the oracle, let's see if I can find the quote. The moody muse, no intention, no answers. I love this because I've found it's very difficult for me in the Michael conversation, taking this spark, taking these, what started as an existential crisis at age 11, when almost like a fall out of the Waldorf nest of my fairy tale love, New York City, harshness, no one knows what's actually going on. Adults are fucked up too. September 11th happened. I want to kill myself. I can't stand this place, or I'm going to become a creative. Finding that genuineness, which allowed me to navigate 10 years of being a white rapper, which is completely uncomfortable and awkward, but because the spark of it was what I just described, I think there was enough respect in my meeting with various people in the hip hop realm in New York that they said, all right, we'll give them a pass to et cetera. And then I finally developed a distinct style of my own, which transcends that form. But trying to then say, what genre is this? The record label says, what's the what's the demographic? What's the theme? What's the, I don't have a product. The product is no product, it's kind of, et cetera. So when I read this part of your book, along with the trickster mirror. I'm combining things here because of time and just, but it really gave me relief because I've had parts of myself, especially like things like, the fool or the glutton or the horny old man, that kind of thing, like lust in general. It's been such a tricky thing to navigate, but to feel it reflected in a way, it gave space. And kind of the Abraxas Hess's book, Damien, is one of the changed my life. All of Hess's work, but that kind of marrying of the dark and the, Steppenwolf is all about that. His bourgeois kind of spiritual, right, good, whatever you want to call it. And then like the wolf on the steps who wants to drink and fuck and blah, whatever. The moody muse, no intention. She has no answers. Obviously the she is something, perhaps, as my wife said, that Hillman and Young attributed that title because they were men. I don't know. That was my wife's idea, but we'll go with she for now. She invites more mystery, more amor fati, speaks in symbols, elusive. The notion of the anima parallels the long-held notions of creative individuals as naturally ambiguous, prone to shifts in moods, irresponsible, difficult to understand, like the ancient oracle and muse who made sense by speaking nonsense, and easily lured into long periods of reflection somewhere outside of or beneath full consciousness. Both anima and artists do not bring answers to practical problems. They bring what Hillman called image answers, which retain their mystery as they stir a sense of amor fati, a love of one's own unknowable fate that performs a double duty of luring us onto the bridge and onto more imaginative quests while entangling us in the world. That was like, I had to read it to my mom and Molly, and I was like, see, this is me. This is what I've been, and I think it is difficult, though, back to the, again, Michael thing. It was perhaps fate to talk to him this morning. How do you do that? How do you work with people? How do you give yourself the space, the audacity, if you're head to toe tattooed? I am all in for the muse, have been since 13. I've devoted my life. I've been in a mental hospital when I was 24 on a chemically induced psychosis for over a month. I've lost my mind, found my mind, dedicated everything I have, risked everything I have. Even sobriety is that, even family life is that. And yet it hasn't clicked. And, even the reason I met you is another attempt to find that. So can you speak to any of that resonates or sparks something in you in this moment?
Yeah, I am, very moved by that, and, picturing all those episodes in your life, getting to where you are today. I think one thing that can give us perspective is something you touched on a little while ago about maybe the higher Zach, and I would maybe turn again to Hillman and his the way he was influenced by what he learned from Henry Corbin, the French scholar who was an expert on Islamic mysticism. He spent as much time in Tehran as he did in Paris. Was very influential in bringing another culture's mysticism.
Does Gurdjieff fall into that category at all?
I would say yes, into that category of that sort of scholar, teacher, mystic.
Eastern French connection.
Yeah.
Sorry to disrupt, but I was finding Gurdjieff recently and just thinking about him and Rumi and Sufis but Corbin, you're telling me about Corbin.
Yeah, Henry Corbin. But one of the ideas that he impressed upon Hillman that shows up, Hillman flips this idea that individuation, classical Jungian term of bringing together all of the parts of ourselves over a human lifetime, including the shadows, the dark parts, the parts we don't want to see and know, which could contain wonders. Just let's keep that idea of individuation on one side. Hillman's thought was soul making. That was his response to that, where it's not so much developmental toward something, toward a wholeness, but that you are what you are when you come in. And that soul spark, that seed that he used the idea of the acorn within the oak, his classic acorn theory in his most commercially successful book, Soul's Code. But that little acorn is, that's the thing that is individuating. It's not Mary, it's not Zach, it's the acorn, the image, the daimon, the soul, the angel.
The genius.
The genius, yes. Genius, daimon, angel, soul, image, acorn are all the terms that Hillman used because you can't settle on one term. So I would, one thing that could give us a little perspective when we're reflecting, as you have been, is that maybe it isn't my individuation. Maybe I am the companion, the vessel, the vehicle.
The squirrel. The squirrel in the oak tree.
That's the squirrel in the oak tree. My dogs love those, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never caught one, thank goodness. But that shifted a lot for me in a time of trying to make things happen, to will things in my artistic career that I couldn't do. So it's the classic surrendering.
What did that look like for you? I mean, as much as you'd like to share, because I've asked this to many people I respect who, I don't want to say they're on the other side of what I'm going through, but some are. And it's that kind of Tai Chi, don't do anything, but you do something. So what was that like for you of surrendering, if you don't mind me asking?
I didn't want to do it. It wasn't something that I consciously and wisely said, well, now I will just surrender to this and allow my soul or a greater force or something to move this from what felt very static for a very long time. It was something that happened on its own. That's actually one of the wisest things I found in Jung. And I really, like so many people, I came to depth psychology, to Jung, and so many others, Hillman in particular, looking for relief from this suffering of, I can't make this happen on my own. My life is not turning out the way that I had expected or that I wanted to. And in that time period, again, at the classic midlife stage, really suffering with a lot of physiological symptoms, being in a place that didn't suit me, feeling abandoned, very lonely, as if my career was at its end, which in some ways that early career was. It was a death that I could not prevent. It was part of my fate. And had that not happened, I don't think that I would have emerged over time into a life that I feel is much more valuable now, a life that is offering things of value to other people. It was something I fought, tooth and nail, but I had to rebuild myself somehow. And one way to do that was, for me, just taking a deep dive into learning what the masters of the soul had to say about a human life.
So that brings me to the soul. And I wanted to highlight some of the parts of your book asking, what is a soul? An entity or essence that undergoes a type of constant transformation or reincarnation. The soul is more a perspective rather than a substance, and a viewpoint toward things rather than a thing itself. This perspective acts as mediator between ourselves and everything that happens around us. Every attempt at a clear definition is futile. Hillman suggested that the word soul might also be imagined as that unknown component which makes meaning possible, turns events into experiences, is communicated in love, and has a religious concern. And there's a bunch more there. But yeah, the soul, according to early Greek philosopher Heraclitus, remains undiscovered, though explored forever to a depth beyond report. So that, read the book, as I mentioned, because there's incredible, detailed descriptions while honoring the ambiguity that I've never come across in such a concise way. And I'm someone who's been using the word soul since 13, and I think that word encapsulates probably what's wrong with everything, the lack of it. I like the idea of how the soul sees. That was fascinating. The soul sees by means of affliction. That kind of answers some of the stuff I just talked to as well, of the personal suffering I've had. The crazy artist, the daft poet, mad professor are neither romantic cliches nor anti-bourgeois postures. They are metaphors for the intimate relation between pathologizing and imagination. The wound and the eye are one and the same. Insight through woundedness is one of the hallmarks of the shaman and a key component of a shamanic sensibility that is so often displayed by artists who endure and are continually remade by their creative illnesses. So the idea that, how I understood it, that the soul actually creates problems, or the illusion of problems, or the perspective of an issue in order to understand new information. And that I'd love to hear your thoughts. And that was her intense daydream of me. Like she has she or higher Zach or who knows, has created this intense daydream of this life, particular sufferings, particular joys, the makeup of what I embody in order to something. And this world is the veil of soul making, if you call it anything. I think Hillman, someone said that, but I love that declaration. So
yes.
Can you speak to that soul process, pain, wound, eye?
Absolutely. There's a lot of Hillman in there, as you probably recognized. You just mentioned Revisioning Psychology a little while ago, his groundbreaking, spectacular book that really put him on the map. One of the most intriguing sections is one on what he calls pathologizing.
Yeah.
How the soul, from his estimation, from his vast learnings in history, mythology, archaeology, philosophy. These are multifaceted people who brought depth psychology into being, and archetypal psychology. Hillman and his group, they had so much to pull from. So he develops this idea, and again, based on much earlier thoughts and insights from mystics, philosophers, creators themselves, that the soul wants experience, that the soul may choose its life on earth. It may choose the human companion, and that during this exploration, the soul acts perhaps as the spy, the eyes and the ears of the great mystery out of which it has emanated for this manifestation. You can find parallels to this in some Eastern thoughts too. I'm thinking of the Buddhist Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh's idea of interbeing and how why we are so, we can't understand and we fear change and manifestation, but everything is constantly either being made, unmade, remade out of, according to Han and other philosophers and theologians, out of the same stuff. So when, and there's a fabulous quote that I included in the book along the same lines from the theologian Meister Eckhart, the Christian theologian, about when the soul wants to experience something. He also uses the she pronoun. She throws out an image of that and joins herself with that image and experiences everything, whatever that is, in a human life, the highest of triumphs to the lowest of sufferings and losses. So that can pull us back a little bit from our own personal stories, what's happening in our own personal lives and has happened, the trajectory of our lives that we can look back upon. And you have more to look back upon now at 38 than you did, let's say 10 years ago. I have plenty to look back upon now, almost twice life that you have led so far. So there's this idea again in Hillman that's so inspiring about being lived by, and that the soul is adventurous, curious. There's an amazing, very short poem, and I can probably find it while we are here speaking, by the American poet Jane Hirschfield, who spent a lot of time in a Buddhist monastery, called Amor Fati, the love of one's fate, that you realize you get to a point where you wouldn't trade the lows that have occurred in your life for just the highs, that everything fits. And this little tiny poem is the soul sort of looking down at the possibilities of entering into a human lifetime. It goes something like, "Oh, little soul, you start to quicken." And, that word quickening has been used for maybe centuries, but to think about the life forming as the embryo forms into a human person. So, oh, little soul, with this quickening, you see the troubles and problems and sufferings that you may have to endure in a human lifetime. But yet you open the door and go in anyway. I'm not Jane Hirschfield. I will find the poem for you because it is so beautiful. But that is that's the gist of it, that the soul sees all that and still wants to do it, wants to feel everything, wants to be part of everything that a human can possibly experience. That doesn't mean that the soul is omnipotent and can cause situations to happen. But back to the Hillman, the soul can maybe stir up some trouble or stir up something that we would not have planned for ourselves in order to have that experience.
Thank you. So we've gone over a bit of the soul and perhaps what the soul is up to and us being lived through. So I'm interested in how, meanwhile, we're living in a soulless West, you might say, the West's general dismissal of the soul. What it's like to live a soul-oriented life in an environment that does not encourage this path, which goes back a bit as well to the civic duty of the artist. I know that's going to be part of your version 2 expanded exploration of your book. the duty to restore the dignity and freedom of the image maker in the name of the liberty of the people against the rising tides of commercialism, industrialism, and empire, which were the enemies of the first romantics as they are of us today. Hillman says, open the eye of the soul, the human soul, to see the soul in the world, to see the cosmos and to feel at home among its adornments, to celebrate and rejoice in existence, recalling the soul of the individual to its participation by means of imagination in its home in this world. So living in a soulless West, or a place where there's a general dismissal of soul, I've always liked the idea that I've been reminded by certain people I respect that although by my barometer of Western estimation, I may have not succeeded, that just by existing and the things I've done have been very impactful and are. You know, I knew a man who's now on the other side who would meditate 18 hours a day. And he knew that was one of his contributions. But obviously no one saw that except me when he was staying at my house and meditating 18 hours a day. How do we do these things? That was a huge part that jumped out. I know I feel because of who you are that you're able to process. And in our remaining 15 minutes, I just want to touch on a few points and then obviously let you respond, reflect. The negative capability is something that I was struck by. That artist, the artist as someone who is particularly gifted at tolerating discomfort, the manner of being in uncertainties, mystery, doubt without an irritable reaching for fact and reason, similar to Jung's holding of the tension between the opposites that allows for something new to emerge. In the middle, as Hillman suggested, artists are not special human exceptions, but in fact simply more vulnerable, susceptible, and porous human beings. What allows them to risk a heightened level of openness? How do they shift into the state of negative capability? How do they manage to survive their encounters with the unconscious, the imagination, the dead, etc.? I just have always thought that, not that I've always thought, but that summarizes what I've experienced, that just artists being, I don't know, better or just more stubbornly in that zone to hold the tension, to suffer actively to some extent, to not gloss over. And I don't think we have a choice, a lot of us. But I found that fascinating, that the negative capability.
Yeah, that's Keats. That's the same romantic poet that coined the term or the phrase called the world the veil of soul making, which was so influential to Hillman. So again, it takes a poet, it takes an artist to say something that a psychologist might need an entire book or career to say. But it is that endurance. It's staying in the suffering when we would like to flee, waiting for something to emerge. It is much like when people go on vision quests. I'm working with a dissertation student now whose spiritual realm practice is the Lakota practice religions. And she will make the journey to her community, back to her community, in Wyoming, Montana, those regions, and fast and sit and wait for a vision for a couple of days. And that is, in a way, parallel to what artists and creators are capable of doing, sitting and waiting for something to be revealed to them.
For the milk to turn into cheese, as Dimitri Martin says.
Yes, and then spreading that out, spreading the cheese out. Yes, for their community.
For lunch.
it is, it's not something you do for yourself. It's something you do for your soul,
For
for the
Instagram.
world's soul, for Instagram,
No, I'm
for
just
a lot of people.
No.
Well, I just want to throw that out that it's not a hard line of an either or.
Of
There
course.
are a ton of, the Instagram shamans out there, but there are also very sincere people who are doing some important work, who also find time to have a social media presence. So
The soul, in my estimation, like Hess with the laughter of the immortals, doesn't take itself so seriously. Friend of mine mentioned yesterday the fool being, in a lot of traditions, I think, in his understanding, actually the last step in the major arcana, not the first, or maybe it's first and last, but that detachment of the someone who's outside of duality, the dog biting his butt, trying to kind of like logic to bring him back and in his bag or past lives, and just not take. So whether it's Instagram, this, that, I think it's all, it's all whatever. But I do feel a call personally right now to get out of the noise, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, we all need time to get out of the noise. Part of, I think, an artist's duty is to be kind of an amphibian creature, to have the solitude, the hermetic life that leads to the quiet. You have to be quiet to sit long enough to receive anything. And then there is the sharing, the crafting. But you're talking about the fool, and you may know of the tradition of the sacred fool, the one that is the bringer of wisdom, but in the most unlikely of guises. So at some point, this is a fabulous book. Cecil Collins, who was a British artist and mystic, The Vision of the Fool, and other writings, is something that I want to try to bring out a little bit more. I love that idea of the sacred fool.
Me too. I think that's part of why I came here, why Tom Robbins and Kurt Vonnegut and these types of authors have always spoken to me 100%. So in our, let's say, 12 minutes, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is kind of go down these categories, and maybe I'll just read the little heading that I put and maybe the first sentence of apart from your book to see if something wants to come out as we wind down this journey for now. So I was fascinated by suppression of witch consciousness. That's something that I've written a lot about, and it's been in my field for as long as I can remember. Tarnas argued that the evolution of the Western mind has been founded on the repression of those aspects of life that have been identified with the feminine. Denial of an undifferentiated unitary consciousness of the participation mystique with nature, of the anima mundi, of the soul of the world, of the community of being, of the all-pervading, of mystery and ambiguity, of imagination, emotion, instinct, body, nature, woman. All of that which the masculine has projectively identified as other. I like the idea of fear of beauty being kind of when you allow the soul to come through clearly because of the beauty, because of the change, because of these kind of revelations or reflections that don't really care about your plans, how to make God laugh, tell her your plans kind of thing. But I love fear of beauty being the ultimate object of human fear is beauty. Nothing is more disarming, more ravishing than its eruption in our lives. The idea of the loss of myth consciousness and how kind of, Michael Meade said, the world is not made of atoms, it's made of stories. So we're living within stories, within stories, within stories, whether we know it or not. And so obviously there are myths happening, but they can be myths that don't yield maybe such positive results. And so this, now a world bereft of radical significance is not long tolerated. It leaves men radically unstable so that they will seize at any myth or pseudo-myth that is offered. Living in a culture of control and repression, that's a big point that jumped out. Jackson Lear talks about a culture of control built upon long-standing assumptions regarding the primacy of the individual human being and the efficacy of human agency over the vast collection of unseen forces that interact with our conscious intentions and which were once called fate, and how today's creators are still suffering from the splitting off and the elevation of humankind above nature, masculine above feminine, reason above the irrational. I'm a huge fan of the irrational, as we've established. Yeah, so how nice it would be if repression worked. It obviously doesn't. It's also terrifying to go the other way, but seemingly the way to go. And finishing in my notes, I said, "Do not lose hope, you matter," and quoted your book. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, like Mary Oliver said, in other words, it will never exist through any other medium and it will be lost. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. And lastly, one of my favorite, the whole book is my favorite, but no artist is pleased. I love that because it's like part of me was thinking maybe this album, maybe this tattoo, maybe this shirt will be like, finally. But no artist is pleased. There is only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that makes us more alive than the others. So that's a barrage of you, back to you, and all the voices that I don't know how you sat in that stream of. Wow. And I know you said that at the end, just like your process and the winding road of that and not having the I in there, but obviously there's an I behind it. So, yeah.
I wanted to be a host. That is, maybe I didn't know what I wanted when I started writing this book, but what happened is that I settled into being this host for these incredible voices, things that I had written on sticky notes 20 years ago that I still had in notebooks, things that I had scrawled out by hand, things that I had uncovered in my master's and Ph.D. education. It all filled up this binder of like, these are my touchstones and these are my people, my ancestors of wisdom. And you were just quoting Martha Graham there about the divine dissatisfaction, the fact that no artist is pleased. And I reread that statement just the other day, and it just rings so true with the things that I'm trying to create and make and do, but to not do it because I'm afraid of how it might turn out, how it might be received, that it might not hit the mark, is also not something that I want to do.
I would say, just to add to that, though, I don't know about you, but I'm pleased when I'm in the flow of it. Mm-hmm. So there is a great joy in this. It's like Michael Jordan or Shea Gilgeous, or shout out to Halliburton. When you're in that flow, there is a lot of joy. And I think there's an afterglow of the flow. Like for a day or so, I can still get high off of the new song and maybe share with someone I care about and feel that. But then they start to lose that something for me, and then often I'll put them anyway. So there is, it's not just drudgery and dissatisfaction. There's obviously like super joy and emotions of bliss I've never experienced in other ways. And it's a never ending.
Yeah. And also dissatisfaction, desire, that is sort of the crossroads. One of the ideas that I develop at the end, again, with help from my friends, Martha Graham, Jung, Tarnas, Claude Levi-Strauss, Hillman, the cavalcade of artistic ancestors, goes on
You
and
got it.
on.
You got a
But
good crew.
I brought them into this great dinner party at the Crossroads, and
Beautiful.
wanted to this book to be a testament to that, for people to find their own touchstones. And I also left breadcrumbs everywhere, thus the citations, for people to find their way back to the original sources. Read for yourself in context, your listeners, if some of these ideas have captivated you, go further with them.
Yeah, I'll put obviously the link to your book in the show notes for those listening, and like you just mentioned, within your book are breadcrumbs galore.
So many. Can I read you the Amor Fati poem?
Please.
Okay, I think it's going to make this perfect. Or Ouroboros, the serpent that is eating its own tail, brings us back to a couple of the points we've talked about, and really to the beginning of this conversation. So, Amor Fati by Jane Hirschfeld. Little soul, you have wandered lost a long time. The woods all dark now, birded and eyed. Then a light, a cabin, a fire, a door standing open. The fairy tales warn you, do not go in. You who would eat will be eaten. You go in, you quicken. You want to have feet. You want to have eyes. You want to have fears.
Wow.
Yeah, it takes a poet.
I like how Freud said there's no, like, even in his, I don't know much about Freud. I just know that he seems a little less soulful than some of the others, but how he tipped his hat to poets and said there's nowhere that I go where a poet has not been before. I thought that was funny.
It's really funny. That's why I put that in there. One of his analysans noted that during a session with him, he's like, dang it. Everything I think I discovered, there's some poet or philosopher, mystic that's already been there.
Let me share. Yeah, exactly. On that note, let me share one thing with us before you go, if you don't mind, from my favorite, one of my, I have my crew. And if you've ever read Journey to the East by Hermann Hesse, I've always thought of this. Recently, I don't spend a lot of time with other people. I have like diehard friends who emerge here and there, but I spend my time with Haruki Murakami, with Hermann Hesse, with Rumi, with Vonnegut, etc. And I love this kind of, you have to risk the being ostracized by the congregation, and you have to endure this very uncomfortable limbo. But on the other side, if you navigate that, you become a member of the kind of crew, the immortal time travelers, I like to call them, in your dinner table. So that's pretty awesome that you can commune throughout time. To leave us with this, Hesse on poetry from one of his fairy tale books. I've always felt a certain kinship with poets, and have gotten to know quite a few on whom my friendship was not entirely wasted. Poets, even today, more so than other people, are inclined to believe in certain stable, eternal forces and concepts of beauty, which lie half asleep in the womb of life, the intimation of which sometimes shines through the enigmatic present as summer lightning shines through the night. In such moments of illumination, it seems to them that all ordinary life, and they with it, are nothing more than pictures limned on a lovely curtain, and only behind this curtain does genuine true life go on. The most supreme, the most eternal words of the great poets seem, even to me, but the babblings of a dreamer who, without knowing it, murmurs through heavy lips of the heights of the world beyond, heights he has only briefly glimpsed. And he goes on to say, I want to wait for my poems to come to me instead of breathlessly and anxiously hunting them down, which is what you said in various ways. So thank you for your time, your timeless time. And
thank you.
Please,
It's a great conversation.
I was joking with a friend saying, I hope to join your program at some point if life allows, but I was saying, we'll see, maybe in this podcast, I'll try to get a semester's worth of wisdom, but I already did with your book, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach.
Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful conversation. Means a lot to me. Thank you.
Ragged to riches, had a vision, then it grew underground. Mothership and love and living off of this dirty sound. Preaching, no one reaching each other, lonely now. Fickle feelings I've been feeling, turning this dirty sound. Ooh, what your eyes don't see, move. Feel this God in me through. Told him I'm not me, you. Told him I'm not. If I don't get as high this time, I'ma have to extra next time. Borrowing my neighbor's sunshine, smile worth a million. When I'm feeling how I'm feeling now, maybe though this pain is not mine, haunted by my bloodline, I could be your missing piece, your little secret. Your little secret. Your little secret. I could be your missing piece, your little secret. If I don't put my pen to page, how the fuck this shit gon' change? Critic tried to clip my wings, I'll admit that shit it stings. No exit in my head or heart, prisoner of self I caught myself like holding fish in raw. Fish don't talk about no water, so get me hard, get me high, then give me God. Build me up, spin me round, then rip me off. Feeling how I'm feeling now, maybe though this pain is not mine, haunted by my bloodline, I could be your missing piece, your little secret. Your little secret. Your little secret. I could be your missing piece, your little secret. Little secret.